some liturgical aerobics for you there. Stand up, sit down, get the blood flowing. We continue through the series on mental health, and we are very fortunate to have a lot of people in our congregation who play roles in this. And one of those is Katy Kanelos. She's a social worker, and I can't believe you're looking for a job because you're awesome. Whenever I have a question about youth, I ask Katy, and Katy makes me look smart. So, Katy, come on up, and Katy's going to start out this morning. We're looking at mental health, but specifically adolescents and young people, with a little bit more of a focus in that direction.
Well, good morning. Like Pastor Paul said, my name is Katy Kanelos, and I am a social worker that recently graduated from grad school. During my time in grad school, I had the great opportunity to work at Badger High School and LGMS and working with adolescents. Because of this, I worked with many adolescents that have mental health issues. The more common ones I saw were depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. These mental illnesses can look very different from person to person, and labels have been put on our adolescents because they looked or acted lazy, or because a teen lashes out in anger for no reason. Well, there is a reason. And this is why we are going to break down and talk about mental illness and what I have seen and what they look like. So depression. It can look like a happy person, someone who is upset or sad. And on the inside, they can feel like a lot of effort to get out of bed in the morning, to get dressed in the morning, and even to shower. Anxiety can look like a person that doesn't want to talk to you or hold a full conversation with another person. To an outsider, we might label this as rude and be quick to judge this person because they don't want to be around other people or in large crowds. On the inside, this person might feel scared, tired, or intimidated. PTSD. It can look like a fake smile or someone who gets frustrated really easily. It can look like a person saying they're okay when really they're not, but hurting on the inside. It can look also like a person getting mad really easily because they're having flashbacks from the trauma they have occurred. It can also look like a person being antisocial. From the inside, it can feel lonely, scared, and different. These types of mental illnesses are very common, and I have worked with many. Even today, mental health has that negative stigma to it. And as a professional, my goal is to decrease that stigma. So let's talk about for a second and think about what we do for our family members and friends that have just told us that they have the flu, a common cold, or just broke a bone. More often than not, we are there for them. We bring them soup, take them to the doctor, or check in on them via maybe FaceTime or checking in on them at home. So we do these kind gestures because we show them we are constantly there for them. But what do we do for those loved ones that have just opened up to us and have told us that they have been diagnosed with a mental illness? Are we treating them the same way? And I hope the answer is yes. It should always be yes, because mental illness is treatable. As a community and congregation, I challenge you this week and your kids to write a letter and check in on somebody that you haven't heard from in a while. And I really mean a good old-fashioned letter with a stamp, not just a text, because we need to be that communication between each other. Thank you.
I have to give this to you now because I know you got another destination here, but you got to get the right one. And please don't look at the way I spelled your name on the card. Thanks for helping out this morning. But you can look at the envelope because I spelled your name right on the envelope. Oh, mercy. I like the way that she showed us how it looks on the outside, but also described how it feels on the inside. We don't always know what's going on there. Prophets are important for us. Prophets are truth tellers. Too often, I think when someone asks us, what is a prophet, or you think about what a prophet is, you think of prophecy. It's someone who predicts the future, right? And certainly in Micah today, that is a part of it. In chapter 5, Micah is talking about the one who's coming out of Bethlehem, and even talks about we'll know the sign when there's a woman in labor giving birth, right? Jesus is definitely on the mind of Micah. But most often what prophets do is tell the truth. They speak the truth into the reality that they see playing out before them. And they see that through the lens of God, through the lens of faith. So for Micah, he's seeing, what is your crime, O Jacob? You're blowing it, Israel. As you look at this timeline here, we're in the time of the kings. So we talked about David and Solomon. Well, as soon as Solomon was done, they started fighting about who was going to be in charge, and the kingdom actually split. There was the kingdom of Israel in the north. They had a king. And in the south, in Judah, they had a king. And all of them were pretty lousy. I mean, every now and then there's a bright spot. Hezekiah, Josiah, those guys. Everybody else, awful. And Micah is speaking into the injustice, into everything that is falling apart, and saying, this is not who you are. But prophets also say who you are. And that's chapter 6 of Micah. And if you've ever heard someone say, I just don't know what God's will is for my life, Micah has the answer. What is it the Lord asks of us? To do justice. To love mercy. And that word mercy, that's chesed. So mercy is just one part of it. Pastor Sarah talked about this last summer. Chesed is that Hebrew word that means unconditional favor or loving kindness, faithfulness. It's all of that. It's God's chesed. Love chesed and walk humbly with our God. Now, that might not give you the answer of, should I buy this home? Should I go to that job? Should I marry this person? But it is God's will for your life. This is who you are. That's the work of prophets. A couple more speakers. So Katy kind of showed us what mental health concerns look like. We have some folks here who are going to talk a little bit about what's available, and you're going to start walking sooner today, or this service, because I just keep talking until they get up here. Mike Giovingo is in the administration over at Badger High School, and he will be sharing a little bit with us about what we do over there. And then Jen Reed, we just received her and her family as new members at last service, and we have her speaking in church today. But Jen is in the counseling department over there and works specifically with a lot of at-risk students.
Yep. And I mentioned last service, I still think, at least on my part, this is not so much to hear my expertise, because I think I lack that in this field, but it's a ploy to get me to church 3 times in the same month. So I have a sneaky suspicion that's what it was all about. Pastor Paul, perhaps my wife. But as Pastor Paul mentioned, my name is Mike Giovingo. I've been in education for 27 years, and the last 22 have been up here in Lake Geneva, right up the road at Badger High School. And there I served alongside teachers, counselors, custodians that have been there a lot longer than myself. As a teacher, I've been also a coach, and now I'm an administrator. And during my 27 years, I've seen the need for mental health among my students increase every year. And so as Dr. Dan Bishop mentioned last week, if you were in attendance at service, what are some of those obstacles? In my school, I know, and nationwide as a statistic, about 20% of our kids will need some form of mental health care this year, but 80% of them won't receive that care. And so why is that? And there are a number of obstacles, and I thought Dr. Dan Bishop did a good job of presenting a number of them, and one that hit home with me is the idea of the stigma around mental health. And so as we wrestle with that obstacle and we figure out a way to be brave in our own lives and overcome that bias, and then move, more importantly, I feel, to get treatment for ourselves or for our family, and specifically my world, children, I think we become a healthier and better world and community and church. Once you get done with that obstacle, then I think sometimes people tell me when I meet with them in my office, the next obstacle is, where do I then search for that health? And that's what this incredible, talented counselor and social worker is going to talk about in terms of our school district, which really is no different than other schools around the area, like Elkhorn area, Bigfoot. They all have therapeutic models. Williams Bay as well. They have therapeutic models, but our community and our county at large also has additional resources that you might not be familiar of, and Jen's going to talk about those.
Thank you. A little shorter, I'll just put this down. I just wanted to speak a little bit about the types of mental illness that we are seeing. As Katy referenced, we have, on a daily basis, I may see someone who has anxiety, and then anxiety may come in the form of a panic attack. I may see someone who's suffering from depression, and that may come in with some suicidal thoughts. I may see someone who has post-traumatic stress disorder from childhood trauma. I may see someone who's bipolar, who has extreme highs of manic and then lows. And so how do we work with that? How do we get them through school? You need to have a high school diploma. And so they're dealing with these things, and what can we do to assist our students? One thing that we can do, and it's so great about Badger High School and our district as a whole, is that we have so many resources. I'm one of 5 counselors at the high school. We also have a school psychologist full-time and a part-time school social worker. So we have some resources, and those resources may be something as simple as giving them a chill pass, which is just a pass that allows them to come out of class if they're feeling stressed. We may be able to modify their schedule based on check-ins with a counselor in the morning. We may be able to assist them with getting some independent counseling with one of the counselors or the school psychologist, or even attending a group, because we run different groups from time to time at the school. If they're needing more resources outside the community, we have things such as we have a partnership with Credence Therapy Associates, which is in Elkhorn, and they have space in our building. And so then children are able to see a therapist in-house, which is helpful because sometimes, as you know, we don't have public transportation, and it's difficult for caregivers to get their children to those therapy places. We also, as a district, have a complete strategic plan of 5 years to address mental health, because we see that it's such an issue that we are now starting to look at what can we do as a community and as a whole. And so I think that's a very important thing. I'm very proud of the fact that we are doing that. Something, too, if you are not a part of this district, if you're not part of this community, then seek out the resources within yours. Approach your schools. The counselors will know what they have available. Go on to the websites. Find out what services are there. We have some resources for the community that will have some brochures next week that will be back in the back of the church. And so seek those things out, even if it's just wondering what's out there. You don't have to say anything that you don't want to say. Just find out what's available. But I thank you so much for your time, and I thank you so much as a congregation for this and wanting to know more about the mental health that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
Thanks so much.
There's help. There are resources out there. Many of them. We were going to put together a list of counseling services in our area, and there's too much. They have them at Mercy and Aurora, so maybe that's the place to start with your doctor, or maybe your insurance company if you have insurance. If you're looking to get resources that way, or to figure out where you fit, but there's a lot out there. And I think that fits into our prophetic word for today. What is it that the prophets are pointing us to? They're pointing us to God and to who we are as God's people. And I have a couple things to hit, and then I'm done. One is our congregation. Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with our God. Last week, Dr. Riley Martinson was here, and we heard about elders rising. Too often, we have relegated elders and elderhood in our community to, well, they've done their thing and their time has passed. No more. Wow, what an event to see how much power and possibility and promise and wisdom is in that group. And elders are rising. And everybody who participated in making that such a wonderful event, our thanks goes out. But it was such a powerful day here at the church, and for Pastor Carl and for everybody who attended. So thank you for that one. And then the second one is yesterday was a hard day here. It was a hard day because we were mourning the tragic loss of Corey Brown, but it was a powerful day to see so many come and surround the Brown family, all their friends, to gather together in love and care for one another, and the students who gathered around those kids. It looked like the church was at work. It was so full of promise and hope in the midst of such pain. So I'm just so thankful for everyone who helped with the luncheon or who was just here to give a hug or offer your prayers. It was so powerful. We're doing good things. And now I want to hit you right where you're sitting. When God looks into each of us, when God sees into the deepest parts of our being, what God sees is God's self. Each of us is created in God's image, so when God looks at us, it is with the eyes of love, and what God sees is God's self. That divine spark that gave each of us life. That is what God sees. So when we look into ourselves with the eyes of faith, when we see past our insecurities, our fears, our failings, our faults, what we see within ourselves is God. As we talk about mental health, there is help. There are ways to get past the fears of anxiety and panic attacks. There are ways to get through the fog and the haze of depression. There is treatment available to manage the trauma, the grief, the adjustment that life throws our way so that we can see inside ourselves in the way that God wants us to see inside ourselves. And we talk about growing in faith, moving on our faith journey, so that when others see us, when others look at us, what they see is God. The love of Jesus, loving like Jesus loves. To see the divine. Next week, we finish our series, and John Neuer will join us, and we're going to talk about what does healing look like? What does healing look like? It looks divine. Amen.